All right. So thank you for attending today's Zoom meeting on copyright. We have with us RoJean Loucks, who has graciously accepted the offer of helping out today. And she has arranged many books, and they're very good books, and pop music as well. If you have not played her hymns, Harp hymns 1 and 2, they are just great. I keep those on my iPad. They're wonderful. She's given workshops on publishing and on copyrights. And so we welcome RoJean today. And then Angi Bemiss. Angie, you are a former insurance agent or an insurance lawyer?
How about a CFO? So
okay.
I'm an accountant.
She's an accountant. So obviously she's very detail oriented. She makes sure it's right because, you know, if you're an accountant for an insurance company, if you're off by a penny, then you have to account for that. So she makes sure it's right. She has over 150 publications. A lot of them are copyrighted. And so she's very knowledgeable in this area. So without any further ado, oh, and one thing I want to say is Megan, there's Megan. Megan, hi. How do you say your last name now?
Dugec.
Dugec?
Yeah.
Would it be okay if Angie or RoJean would call upon you to give your opinion on some of the knowledge that you have acquired on this topic as well?
Absolutely. I don't know if I'll have anything particularly useful to share, but I'm totally happy to be asked.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So without any further blabbing on my part, I'm going to turn this meeting over, I think, to Angie, and we'll spotlight Angie right now. And then when RoJean speaks, we'll spotlight her. Anna Dunwoody is the co-host. So if I forget to do that, then she's going to cover for me. Okay.
Thanks.
Very good. So Angie,
Yeah.
you are welcome to start.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mary, and thanks, RoJean. And I will mention that Megan is Christy Lynn's sister, and they have done amazing work. I would encourage you to go to, there are probably multiple places to see her, but there are lots and lots of videos and links in her YouTube channel. And it's impressive to hear her play. She teaches how to play the music that she's published, and it's just great information. And Megan has been helpful to me and has a lot of knowledge. So I'm glad you're here, Megan.
She didn't get an invitation, she was registered.
So we have somebody, yeah, thanks. Oh, good, thanks for doing that, Megan. So I hope that everybody received the handout that Mary sent out last night, and ideally you'll have it printed. And because what I tried to do is to put basically everything I could find or that I know on paper. And that way we could all be involved in the conversation today rather than people trying to frantically make notes. So that was the intention of making the handout the way that I did. And I joked with Mary when I had finished it, I started from a blank piece of paper, even though I've taught classes on copyrights and publishing before. And I said that when I had finished, I felt like I had written a term paper. So hopefully you'll find that handout to be helpful. So what I did on the handout is the page numbers are in the bottom right-hand corner of each sheet. And then on the left-hand side of the page, there are line numbers, and I figured that that would be helpful. We'll be going through the first page pretty much in order, and then from there, as people ask questions or bring up particular issues, then we can go directly to that with a line number reference. I figured that that would be helpful. So that's how the handout is laid out. So I started off with the disclaimer, and I think, Mary, you included this in your cover email also, and that is that what we're doing is sharing information based on experience and then on research, but in no way, shape, or form are we trying to say that this is absolutely the right answer. In all cases, we think it is. But the other thing is, obviously, we are not providing legal advice. So if you decide that you're going to pursue, or if you have been pursuing this, please do your own research and engage attorneys if there is something that you really need to do a deep dive in. So in this session, what we're going to do is we're going to start by covering page 1 of the handout. And that is that we're going to go through the basic concepts and some basic principles. And then from there, I am going to be the presenter, and RoJean, hopefully you'll speak up often. And same thing, Megan. But what we'll do is after we've covered the first page, then we will pause and we'll find out what people are interested in hearing, and then we'll try to focus on those particular things. So I'm going to basically just go down page 1. So I have the handout here that I'll be looking at. And so as I mentioned in this session, we're going to start with page 1. We're going to talk about basic concepts, and then we'll go into detail. And I started on line 14, just by clarifying 2 specific types of terminology that are applicable when we're talking about copyrights. One of them is a musical work. We call that all kinds of stuff. We call it songs, composition, piece, tune, melody, work. And in all cases, as many of you I'm sure know, a song is actually a piece that has lyrics that are designed to be sung, but we often refer to pieces that are just instrumentals as songs. And we do that generically. And then the other thing is we will talk about a recording, which refers to us in the handout and in the law. It's often referred to as a sound recording, but that would include CDs, videos now, and that sort of thing. So we'll be using all those terms probably as we're conversing, but I just wanted to get that down on paper. And then the next little section before we actually move into the specifics on copyrights is just some motherly advice. And I think that all of you who have either made a recording or published something or uploaded a video, anything like that, you've probably learned this, that one of the things you want to do is do some research. So before you spend a lot of hours arranging something that you want to publish, especially if it's somebody else's work, what you want to do is research it. And same thing with recording. Start off with the list of your ideal list of the pieces that you want to put on your recording or that you want to upload, and then do some research to make sure that you, number 1, can obtain the copyright for that, and number 2, that it will be easy for you to pay. I learned that again the hard way by selecting some songs that I then had to drill down, spent a lot of time back, this was before the internet, but spent a lot of time trying to track down the copyrights, because as we'll discuss, they can be sold. And so if you have the copyright notice on some old sheet music, that's not necessarily who you would be paying the royalties to. Okay, so now I am on line 24 and wanted to cover 2 specific, or put on the table, shall we say, 2 specific concepts to start off with. The first one is publishing, and the second is performance. So publishing is, there are basically 3 different categories that we're going to be talking about for publishing. One is if you write an original piece, then obviously you own the copyright to that original piece. Then the second category is if you create a new arrangement of a piece that is in public domain, or as you'll see it labeled throughout this handout in PD, public domain, that's another type of publication. And then the third is where you publish an arrangement, your original arrangement of someone else's copyrighted piece. So I'm going to mention that RoJean, one of my absolute favorite pieces to play is Your Autumn Leaves. And that's an example, I believe that that's an example of something that it's a copyrighted piece, so you had to get permission to do that. So again, there are 3 basic categories for publication: your original work, your original piece, your original arrangement of a public domain piece, and then your original arrangement of a copyrighted piece that someone else has written. And then performance. This is a very interesting topic, I think, because in general, you cannot perform music publicly without a license. I mean, literally, there are a few very small exceptions, but if you are performing your music in public, you're supposed to have a license. And we'll get into the specifics on that. But for me, it was pretty interesting to update my knowledge on this and to see that that's very true, that if we're performing music in public, that we need to have a license for that. So, and then on line 32, I mentioned that there are allowable uses, and we'll talk about those, but they're very few. So then moving down to line 35, we're going to talk about different types of licenses and the royalties and fees that get paid for that. And in some cases, the royalties would be per recording or per published copy. And then in other cases, the fee would be something like where you have a license, say a restaurant or a bar or a concert hall, something like that, where they would have a performance license. And so in that case, they're actually paying fees as opposed to royalties. So what the different types of licenses and royalties that we would be dealing with. First one is a print license. And what I did on the handout, if you were able to print it out in color, where there are money calculations involved or money information, I put it in green because I figured that that was information that everybody would be curious about if you didn't already know this. So for example, if a print license for publishing, if you are printing a paper copy like sheet music or in a book, then the print license, the royalty on that is 15% of the retail price. This was a huge shock to me, and that is that if you publish a digital copy, in other words, digital sheet music. So for example, I know that Chrissy Lynn, Megan, I saw that you have a lot of publications that are of copyrighted pieces. The digital license on almost all of those is 50% of the retail price. So I will go through the math in a little bit, but that means that if you sell a piece of music for $10 retail, then upfront you pay $5 immediately for that print license, for a digital print license. The next category are performing rights royalties for public performance. And these are actually fees. And so they are based on a number of factors, but it can be the seating capacity of the organization, that sort of thing. The next category of licensing is mechanical. And this, we all think of paying mechanical licenses if you record a CD. And in the handout, I have this information, but basically you pay per CD, per copyrighted song, and there's a fee. And it is basically that it's about 9 cents per copy, so per song. And so if you have 1,000 CDs and each song, you would pay $91 for that CD. And then there's also an interactive streaming fee royalty that gets paid, and it's a penny per stream. And so, for example, then if you are, I guess I'll say if you're downloading, making your recordings available for download, then you would pay a penny for each copy of it that you sell. And then the last category are synchronization licenses. And that's for music where a sound recording gets used either in a movie or in a television program, for example. And so that's where the person or the organization, the producer that uses your sound recording, if they use it in a movie, then they would negotiate with you to be able to do that, and they would pay a fee to you. So I'm going to pause here and ask I guess I can see a couple of your faces. Is that clear? Does that make sense, what we've covered so far? Somebody shake your head, yes, no? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rich. Okay, Mary had sent out and had suggested that we ask questions if we had questions. And so I think that we've covered all the questions that I saw in the handouts, but what we're going to be talking about is, and this is what Mary had mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be talking about publishing and how that would work. And then also we'll talk a little bit about recording and then about public performance. So some of the questions had to do with if you've been playing online for church services and they got uploaded or they were on, say, Facebook and then YouTube, that sort of thing. There have been a lot of questions about that. And RoJean, I imagine that with your hymn books that you probably got emails quite often from people wanting permission to use your arrangement when they were playing for church. So we'll be talking about that if that's of interest, if that's your particular thing. I was going to ask for show of hands, but when I looked at the gallery view a while ago, there were more people not showing their faces than were. So we'll just proceed that way. But I am going to pause here and say that if you would raise your hand if you have a question at this point, please. We're good?
Angie,
Yes.
just a couple of comments on the first page,
Yes,
if I may.
absolutely.
Along with your motherly advice, allow time. It may take months to get permission.
Yes.
So, yeah. And the fees for publishing the print license may be 15%, it may be 50%. With the Gaither music, they ask 50% upfront.
Great.
So,
yeah,
it just depends. It just depends on the publisher and the copyright owner. They can ask whatever they want. Then you can
Yes.
decide if it's worth it or not.
yes.
Okay.
And you just mentioned two very important things, RoJean. One is, and this will be probably on page 3, is that a print license is not mandatory. People can deny you, and I have had this happen, they can deny you their permission to publish your arrangement of their copyrighted piece. The other thing, and I'm so glad you brought this up, is that you can, if you are going to be publishing, I'll say, sheet music and PDFs, you can actually, in many cases, you can pay for the number of PDFs and for the number of prints. So you pay 15% for the print and 50% for the digital. But if you are getting, say, if you think you're going to sell 500 copies and you don't know if they're going to be print, and you don't know if they're going to be PDFs, then you're absolutely right. They can charge you 50% for all of them. And when we get down further, yes.
And I don't think people realize that there are two different copyrights, one for digital and one for print license.
Yes.
You have to apply separately for each one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I just published a book a couple months ago of secret garden pieces. And that's was through Alfred, and they are very, very easy to work with. And that was where I could do one or the other, but 50% is a lot, and you're paying it up front. And then you have to also pay for your publication costs and that sort of thing. And so I think many of us just go down the route of saying, okay, it will be a paper printed sheet music book type of thing, just because economically that's really the only way you can justify the amount of work that goes into it.
Correct.
Thanks. All right, then, and I apologize if you can hear my paper in the background, but anyway. Okay, I'm going to turn to page 2, and this is a long list of definitions. We're not going to cover all of them, but there's some particular ones that I wanted to highlight before we do a deep dive into the specific types of licenses. So the first thing is on line 52, and it is copyright. And this comes from the US copyright law, that as the owner of a copyright, you are granted certain exclusive rights, including the right to reproduce the copyrighted work, prepare derivative works based on it, distribute copies of it, perform the copyrighted work publicly, and for sound recordings to perform the copyrighted work publicly by means of a digital audio transmission. So if you are the copyright holder, then you are granted by law these specific rights. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the next one is on line 62, and that's public domain, or what we refer to as being in PD. And what happens with that, we'll talk about the dates, and because there are different dates during which they fall into public domain, and that's what it's often called, is that they have fallen into the public domain, and that means that they now belong to the public. And then the next one that I wanted to mention is on line 74. And this is one that we hear a lot about these days, which is cover. If you go to, or cover song, if you go to YouTube, you will see that the pieces that folks have recorded and uploaded, where they've recorded it themselves, is called a cover. By the same token, if somebody, one of my absolute favorite singers when I was young was, and still is, Leonard Cohen. And he wrote Hallelujah, the song Hallelujah, that has been covered, I have read, more than any other song ever. And so if you go to YouTube, you can find hundreds, if not thousands, of cover versions of that song Hallelujah. And again, when you're on YouTube, frequently you can bring up the original person who wrote the song and or recorded it first, but then you can also bring up multiple cover versions of those songs. And then on line 79, we've talked about this a little bit, but public performance. And this is an interesting definition. And again, this comes from the US law. And a public performance includes any music played outside a normal circle of friends and family that occurs in a public place. So what that means is, and we'll look at this on the list, but that means that a public performance can be when you're playing background music. It can be when you're performing in a concert. It can be if you're playing in a shopping mall, an art exhibit, all kinds of things, but that's actually considered a public performance. And so then it is indeed covered by copyright laws. And then the last one is just a simple definition, and that is streaming and downloading. And that just means that it's a digital version versus a hard, like a CD or something like that. All right. I'm going to pause again. I think I'll try to pause at the end of each section and ask by show of hands, by a show of hand, if you have a question. Okay, then we will move on to page 3 and we'll delve into publishing. And so this is copyrights for publishing and for print licenses. And I labeled them, we're going to look at our ABCs. And so what I've done is the 3 different types of copyrights, or the 3 different types of situations where you would need to get permission or where you would have a copyright. I've labeled A, B, and C. So on line 95, I've labeled A to be your original composition. And this is there are some very important things to know, which I think are good news. And the first one is, if it's your original composition, then your copyright is automatic when the work is created. And so that means when it's either fixed in a copy or when you've recorded it the first time, it literally is automatic. Ideally, you put the copyright symbol and the year and your name on the document. And I've put an example there of copyright 2021 Angi Bemiss, but you may also want to register your copyright, but it's very important to know that it is not required. You own the copyright the minute that you have, as mentioned, the minute that you have put it in fixed it in a copy or in a recording. But if it is a piece that you suspect that down the road people may infringe on your copyrights, and you want it to be a little bit easier for you to pursue damages from them for that, then you can go ahead and register with the Copyright Office. It's a very easy process. I've put the website here, but it absolutely does not have to be done. And I will tell you that I have not done this on the arrangements that I've done, our original public domain where I'm the copyright holder. So on line 99, this is a little table, a little schedule of the dates that apply to copyrights and when a piece falls into public domain. So if it was, and you'll see that it says this is based on the date first published. So if it was published before or equal to 1922, then it's in the public domain. And then if it was first published between 1923 and 1977, then it is the publication date plus 95 years. And so there are a number of pieces that I've arranged that I was delighted to find the copyright date and to see that it had just recently fallen into public domain. And then if it was originally published in 1978 or after, then it's the life of the writer plus 70 years. And if there were multiple writers or they co-wrote the piece, then it is the last to die. So it's the last surviving author that actually determines the date that the copyright ends and that it falls into public domain.
Question, Angie.
Yes.
Am I correct in remembering that copyrights can be transferred to somebody else and then you have to find out who now owns the copyright? And it may not matter if it was like 1922. If that was passed along to somebody else, then you have to seek a different avenue for getting the rights to that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
I think the date that it falls into public domain remains the same by this schedule, but absolutely, and that is very challenging, and that's why we say do your research, because I published an arrangement long ago of a Neil Diamond piece, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and Dear Father's the name of it. And by the time I did that, the copyright had been bought and sold 3 different times. And it was very difficult to find the copyright holder. And of course, I had put it on a CD, so I absolutely had to pay. And then same thing when I was trying to publish the arrangement. So just to cut to the chase on that, you're absolutely right, RoJean, and that is that copyrights routinely get sold. And then the other thing is that you have to find out who administers the copyrights. And so we'll get into that because as I mentioned earlier, Alfred's very easy to work with. Hal Leonard, not so easy to deal with. And it can take, I've had requests for print licenses outstanding for, there's one in particular over a year. And it's not unusual for their process to take 3 to 6 months.
And you may have some surprises along the way. When I was working with Andrew Lloyd Webber's company to publish Memory, my arrangement of that, they did not accept my first submission because I had changed some of the chords. And unless I wanted to use the chords that were original with the piece, I could not publish it. They had a list of 12 things that I had to change if I wanted to publish their music. And I decided it was worth it, but I
Right.
still play it my way.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful arrangement. I have it and I play it.
Thank you.
But you're absolutely right. And so
Thank-
I've had similar experiences. Uh-oh, that'll only ring twice, sorry. Okay. That's two. Okay. Sorry. And so I've had similar experiences where I won't get into I won't say who was difficult to deal with, but anyway, one company, there's a song where the lyrics have what I deemed to be an apostrophe in the wrong, a possessive apostrophe in the wrong place. They made me change it back. And then I've had very few instances, and this is something that is probably of interest to you all, is that I've had maybe 5 or less instances where my arrangement had to be approved by the composer. And similar to you, RoJean, there's one where the composer, was pretty neat. He wrote a very nice email back. So I was dealing through Hal Leonard, but they had sent it to him for approval. And he sent back a very complimentary email that he liked my arrangement, but would you please change the chord and measure such and such back to the way I had it? So yeah. And then anyway, so it's fun. It's usually fairly easy. It might take a long time. And then, as we said earlier, it can be turned down. You just flat out can be denied. So, okay. So now we're on line 103. And so this is category B, which is your original arrangement of a public domain piece. And in this case, your copyright is automatic when your work is created, meaning that you fixed it in either print or a recording. And again, it's best to put the copyright date, your name on the bottom of the music. You may go ahead and register it, but again, the copyright is automatic. So if you have done an original arrangement of a public domain piece, you own the copyright immediately. And then the third category is what we've been talking about, where you do an original arrangement of a copyrighted piece. And this is something that was a song or a piece that was composed by someone else. And in that case, it does require permission. And as we've been discussing, it's very important to remember that permission to publish an arrangement of a copyrighted piece is not compulsory, and it can be denied, in which case you cannot publish your arrangement. And that's a very important thing. I think we've probably all seen arrangements that have been made available let's just call it contemporary popular pieces where it was not published legally. And so, and there's one song that I know, one arrangement I know of where I had requested a print license and was turned down. So then I knew that when I saw it in somebody else's arrangement, that probably they had the same experience because there was no copyright notice on theirs. So point being, if you're going to pursue the time that it takes to notate precisely your arrangement with hopes of publishing it, then the motherly advice pertains, and that is to go ahead and seek a copyright, a print license for it before you spend a lot of time finalizing your arrangement, getting it set up properly, and then publishing it. So, okay. So now what we're going to do, we know that for type A, which is your original work, you know that the copyright is immediately, you can publish it anytime you want to. We know that if you've done an arrangement of a public domain or a PD piece, that you have the copyright, and so you can publish it immediately. So I thought what we would do is spend some time with category C, which are licenses for different types of publications of copyrighted pieces, and I stress with permission. And so on line 114, a print license for a paper or hard copy, as we've just discussed, the typical royalty has been about 15%. When I started publishing, it was more like, sometimes it was 7%, even 5%. And then it moved up to 12.5%. And the print licenses that I've done for paper copies lately have been at 15%. And another thing that I wanted to mention in this is the print licenses, the legal document that you receive when you deal with, say, Hal Leonard or Alfred, is the legal document specifies that your arrangement is a work for hire. And what that means is that they're allowing you to publish your arrangement, but they own it basically. So they retain the copyright for your arrangement. So when we were talking about Hallelujah that Leonard Cohen wrote, or Memories, that sort of thing, we are able to publish it because we have print licenses, but the copyright actually remains with the copyright holder. And so it might be administered by Hal Leonard, and the original, I don't know actually if Leonard Cohen sold his copyright to Hallelujah, but I have a published arrangement. I do not own the copyright to that. And if somebody wants to record it, then they need to deal directly with the copyright holder. In other words, if somebody wants to record my arrangement or RoJean's or Mary's or Christy Lynn's, then they actually deal directly with the copyright holder, not with the arranger of the music that they're playing. Okay, then for digital or PDF copies, it's similar, everything that I just said, except for the rate. I haven't seen anything other than 50%. So I know that that's what Hal Leonard quotes, and that's what Alfred quote. And so if you're going to publish digital copies, it's 50%. And as we discussed earlier, as RoJean and I were talking about, it may be that regardless of whether it's paper or digital, then your copyright royalty, not your copyright, but your royalty for a print license may very well be the full 50%. Then on line 119, I mentioned something, and this is actually how I got to know Megan, was we corresponded. She was very, very helpful. Thank you again, Megan. And that had to do with publishing music on SMP Press, which stands for Sheet Music Press. Sheet Music Publications Press. SMP Press is what it is. And what they have done, and this is a fairly recent occurrence, is that you can go on for free, you can set up an account, and then you can, if they have tens of thousands of songs in their repertoire for which they administer the copyright. And so if they do, then you can upload your song, your arrangement, and you will get a whopping 10% of your selling price, and you do set the selling price. So let me say that again. You can upload directly to SMP Press. It is a PDF copy that you upload. You have to do the typeset, and then for every copy that they sell of your arrangement, then they will pay you 10% if it's copyrighted, if it's a copyrighted piece. If in fact you upload your original piece, then they pay you 50%. Or if you upload, and again, I have this on there, I have an example of that. If you if you have an arrangement of a public domain piece, it's the higher rate. So this is something that I have started doing because it is so much easier than the process of acquiring a print license and then having to print the music and all that. And I'm going to go through the math and you'll see why, one of the reasons that I think that it is a great thing you might want to consider if you are going to be publishing an arrangement of a copyrighted piece.
I have a question.
Yes.
Back here where you're talking about original composition and the copyright for that, it says fixed in a copy. Does that mean it has to be a beautifully typeset copy, or can it be just a handwritten notations in your own code?
It can be handwritten.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Megan, I can't see you on my screen. Do you have anything to add with SMP or your processes? Please.
Well, I can say it is really super easy. They administer it really smoothly. You get paid out, is it once a month? Yeah, it's a really smooth process. As from what I've seen, I think the Arrange Me structure that SMP Press is based on, I think it's actually owned by Hull Leonard. And so that's, I think, why they have access to such a huge number of titles. Yeah, and it's really simple. What's another thing that's interesting and great about it is that they're actually, if a person wants to buy sheet music digitally, they go to Sheet Music Press and they have the opportunity to stumble upon your arrangement, your PDF. So if you don't have an audience that you're marketing your publications to yourself, Sheet Music Press essentially has their own audience, and yours could be stumbled upon. So you could have buyers that you don't even know, which is a wonderful thing to be part of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's been.
Angie,
Yes.
Linda Paul, I have a question. So some of these open source places like MuseScore, what's going on there? Is that kind of just free and open and nobody tracks it down? Or I had to download something from some Latino music for a wedding a couple of weeks ago, and I've been concerned about that it's may not be legal.
Yeah. I suspect, now that you mention it, Linda, I have seen scores that when I was desperate to find music for something and it wasn't available on any of the online stores, I have found scores, MuseScore and a couple other places, and I don't remember seeing copyright notices on it. So I would imagine that's probably an instance where if the composer chose to, they could probably have that taken down. And we'll talk a little bit about how YouTube handles illegal or uncopyrighted or unapproved uploads of their music. They actually have a system where the copyright holder can protest it. So anyway.
Well, I just wondered if MuseScore had run into any barriers yet, because I've used them a couple of times for specific things that I only found there.
Yes. Yeah. And
Real quick, Angie. Oh, I'm sorry. There are a couple of other people that have questions.
Oh, okay.
But I can't tell because there's so many little pictures. But with MuseScore, there is a $30 membership fee. And if I'm not mistaken, MuseScore does pay royalties.
Oh, good.
They do. So I don't think you have to worry about that, because they did raise their membership fee to $30 a year. And with that price increase goes to pay royalties. And then a couple of other people, I see hands up, but I can't tell. I'll go back on mute. If you guys want to call your name out and ask the question, go ahead.
Tara here, I have a question. I was just wondering for clarification on the sheet music press. Does that mean if you have made an arrangement of somebody else's piece that you don't have to go digging through and try and figure out who the copyright holder is, the SMP will do it?
Absolutely. I just did this yesterday, so I will describe the process. So I uploaded 2 pieces yesterday. And what you do is you sign into your account, which is free. And then they have this wonderful option to do a song search. You find the song. So and it brings up, and you have to make sure obviously that you're bringing up the one that's by the composer of the piece that you've arranged. And literally they bring up a little box on the screen, and it has the copyright information, and that's what they tell you to put on the bottom of your printed music. And so then all you have to do is take your arrangement, add that copyright, put the proper title and the composer on the top, and then create a PDF. And then you upload it, you set the price. And what typically happens is you do that. So I did that yesterday, and I imagine that when I get up tomorrow morning, I will have an email from them that will have the link saying that my arrangement has been approved and that it's now available. So that's all. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is make sure that the song itself is available on SMP Press in that song search. And then the rest of it might take, I don't know, 15 minutes. And
Nancy Cochran, just very quickly to backtrack, can you tell us where to find the written information about all the 3 different levels where I couldn't write it down fast enough, or if it's this, it's the years, where would we find that to look it up?
yeah, Nancy, were you able to print the handout?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the dates start on line 99.
99.
If I understand what you're asking.
99. Sorry.
That's okay.
99, and all the dates are in 90. Oh, I apologize. Yes, it is there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's great to have a simple chart. And it's interesting to me that it's based on 3 different criteria. One is if it was published before this date. Actually, I guess 2 of them are the publication dates. And then it switches over to the life of the artist or the composer.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you so much.
Yep. Anybody else have a question? Speak up. Okay, and Mary, thanks. I did not realize that about MuseScore, and that makes perfectly good sense that there's a membership fee, and then based on, so they can count the downloads, and then they would, I'm sure, pay the royalties to the composers or the copyright holders of the music that's available on MuseScore. And that's actually very similar to what happens when we get into the performance rights, where people have either an ASCAP license or a BMI license. And so they collect a fee as opposed to specific royalties, but then they distribute the money that they collect on a pro rata basis.
I wanted to ask, where do you get your performance license?
Well, if I can just defer that for a page.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. But so we will talk about that. Yes.
Okay.
And the good news is that we don't really have to have them in most cases. So hello, yay for that. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is Mary and I talked and we decided, so I'm looking and it is 5:50 here. I'm in Atlanta. And we figured that it would be worth the time to lay out examples of how much you would make for different publications of your work. And so this, I called it the economics, the real world economics of how much, and I subtitled it for my notes, what it costs and how much you keep. Okay. So, and then I will add it's how much you keep, but of course, how much you keep, that might be your gross profit, but then you have to deduct if you have to pay to have it printed, if you have to pay to have it typeset or anything like that, then obviously that is an additional cost to you. So I hope it's helpful that I'm giving you the line numbers. Hope it's helpful and not annoying. But on line 125, I'm going to real quickly go through the factors that I used in these examples. And so we've got a $10 retail selling price. Now, $10 is pretty high for a piece of sheet music, but it makes the math a lot easier. So that's why I use $10. Okay, and then we're using a $15 paper print license royalty or fee royalty, or a 50% digital. And we're going to go through both examples. So 15% if you're publishing paper, 50% if you're publishing digital. Then Mary graciously agreed to let me lay out on paper what I think some of you know, many of you probably don't know this, but our wonderful Harp World retailers take a 40% discount. And so what that means is if it's a $10 piece of music, then what you get paid, they deduct the 40% and then you keep your 60%. So that means that off the top, you get $6 from Melodies. Let's just say that. Okay. And then the royalty paid by publishers, and this is what we were talking about with SMP Press, for example, or Afghan Press. That's what they pay on their sales of your music. And it's, and again, this is information that Mary graciously provided, that they pay 10% on their paper copies of your music, and they pay 15% on PDFs of that they sell of your music. So this is where Afghan Press is actually the publisher of your music. And now I'm going to go through the examples. So we've got the first category starting on line 132 is if you self-publish, and this is either you self-publish and you sell it to a retailer, or where you have your own e-commerce site. So that is a great way to do it if you want to deal with a website and with a shopping cart. I personally made the decision that you couldn't pay me enough money to do that. So I'll do a little testimonial here for Mary and John and for Melodies. They are absolutely wonderful to deal with. And those of you who know what Mary spent the last, I guess, basically year doing, which was rebuilding the website, I have told her there's not enough money to go through that. She's wonderful to deal with. John's wonderful to deal with. And that is the case, whether it is them selling your music. And I'm sure that if Afghan Press publishes, that she makes it easy. And also for many, I think somebody mentioned this, we're not going to talk about it in this session, but just getting music print to get the notation set up can take hours. So you may have the best arrangement in the world. And this is, I'm not saying mine are great, but I have worked out arrangements. I've spent, say, a day doing the actual arrangement, and then I can spend several hours just getting it in print format, meaning that everything's spacing is perfect. So you can play it fine, but to get it where somebody else can play it can take a lot of time. And so in my bottom line here is, in my opinion, the services that they provide are worth every penny. So, okay. And besides that, they're nice. All right. So now on line 134, we're going to talk about if you print the music. So this is paper for A and B, which is either your original work or your original arrangement of public domain. If you have a piece that's $10 retail on your e-commerce site, you keep $10. You get $6 if it's wholesale, and that's the $10 less the 40% discount. If it is category C and it's a print copy, then you get $4.50, which is the 10, this is very important, the $10 less the 15% that you pay for the print license, less the 40% discount. And that 40% discount is on the retail price. So in summary, if you publish a piece of music that you sell for $10 and you sell it, it's copyrighted, and you sell it through a retailer, then you keep $4.50. Next category is if it is a digital or a PDF version. For A and B, it's $10 if you sell it directly on your own e-commerce site, and it's $6 wholesale if you sell it through a retailer. And then for category C, you get $5 if you sell it on your own website, and that's the $10 less the 50%, 50% for a digital print license. And then if you sell it, this is very, very important, if you sell it through a retailer, you keep $1. So it's a $10 piece of music, you pay a 50% digital print license, and then the retailer takes a 40% discount, so you keep $1, which is 10%, which is why I think SMP Press is wonderful, because it's the same 10% that you get if you sell your music there and you don't pay anything up front. Whereas if you buy say a digital print license, you initially pay 50% of the retail price for the number of copies that you think you will sell initially. And I don't know about you, RoJean, or Megan, with you and Christy Lynn, but I typically will start off with 100 copies. And so what that means is that I would pay, I guess that's $500 up front if it's a $10 piece of music, and you don't know how many you're going to sell. And then after that, it's just do reporting for the additional sales. So if you do a digital publication of an arrangement of a copyrighted work, unless you sell it on your own website, you get 10%, $1 for each copy. And then, so then the next line 141, I have that example. If you sell it through SMP Press, if it's, you get 50% if it's public domain or it's your original work, and you get $1 if it is a copyrighted work. And then the last lines on page 3 are if you sell through a publisher such as Afghan Press, and they pay 10% of the retail price if it is paper, and 15% if it is digital. So I'm going to stop here and take a breath. So somebody ask a question.
I'll just, if you can all hear me, you know, it sounds like the retail companies take a lot, but we really do put a lot of work into getting things up on the website. And Angie had mentioned that I had spent a year, no, it was 18 months, because our website was hacked. And I spent 18 months rebuilding it. And it was a lot of work. And, you know, when we get print music in, we have to receive it in. We have to find a place to put it. We have to put it up on the website, and just putting one piece of music up on the site. I mean, I like to make sure it's done right, so I don't just throw it up there. You know, I try to put a nice description and get nice pictures. So yeah, there is a bit of work in being a retailer, and then there's all the paperwork to take care of, and John does all that. So it kind of takes two. Anyway, have you had your breath of fresh air there? You're ready to go on, Angie?
Thanks. I took a breath and I had some water. So
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And, yeah. And something else that I hadn't even thought about is that you also maintain inventory. So you also have paid that money on the print copies. You've paid that money up front.
We have about $80,000 worth of inventory.
Wow.
That we paid up front. Yeah. So yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I will mention this. Frank Volz is a good friend of Kevin's and mine. And he actually edits my chord notations. He doesn't mess with the arrangements, but he edits my chord notations. And we often joke about the fact that we make minimum wage as music arrangers, and he's a composer. So anyway, okay. Then what we're going to do now is, I skipped page 4. So let's look at page 4. And this is performance rights. And I guess, is it Jane? Is that, hi. So this is where we're going to get into performance rights. And this is something, okay, listen, I'll just start with the basics. As I mentioned at the very beginning, you cannot play music publicly, either recorded or live, without a license. And that's pretty much period. So and a public performance, as I mentioned earlier, includes any music played outside a normal circle of friends and family that occurs in any public place. And so the laws require that you get permission from the composer or the composers, and they can charge a fee for you playing their music publicly. And that includes public via radio, TV, digital service providers, and a concert and any other means. Now, the good news, number one, is that there are tiny categories that are called allowable uses. Sorry. 1, 2, that's it. Okay. So these are very limited use. And so one of the exemptions is for religious services in the course of services at a place of worship or other religious assembly. And what that allows is that it allows you to, it's an unlicensed use. So the good news is if you are playing for a wedding in a church or as a religious service, then you do not, your music, your public performance does not have to pay for the performing rights. Likewise, there's an exemption for nonprofits. So if it's a concert for charity, then that is you're allowed for an unlicensed use. And then there's a transmission exemption for small venues. And in the handout I put, look this up, follow that link. And I checked yesterday, and hopefully the links in the PDF will work. So it should take you directly to the website for the information. But basically this is for small bars and restaurants, that sort of thing. It's a tiny exemption, and it's based on being a small audience. So anything other than those exempt instances require a license for a public performance. So
can I ask a question about that?
Yes, sure.
Where do hospitals fall into that category?
This is interesting. I think that hospitals, if you're not doing a concert, I think that it can qualify. And I'm a certified music practitioner, so I'm a therapeutic musician, and I was very interested. Is that you, Judy? Anyway,
No.
Oh, who was that? Sorry. Hi, Jan. Okay. I believe that it can be considered this normal circle of friends and family, but I would be very careful. And then the other thing is, and let me tell you what the other good news is, and I think that will cover it. And that is that almost everything that I read about this said that you as the performer are not the one that has to obtain the license. It's actually the facility. So it's the organization. And I do know that one of the hospitals where I've played in the past, we actually checked, and they did have an ASCAP license. And so when we get into what's called the performing rights organizations, if they are members of that, then, so you can be an ASCAP license or a BMI license, then you're actually covered. So you don't have to worry about it. And then we'll talk about the concerts are a little bit different, similar, but different. So does that answer? So to the best of my knowledge, as long as it's not a concert in a hospital, if it's, you're just playing for a couple of people, I think it's fine.
Thank you.
Yes.
Angie, I have another question. This is Cindy Schelfenbuhl. House concerts, is that kind of a gray area? It's not a public place, but if you are advertising and having people over at your house that you don't know, I've hosted house concerts and never even thought about it.
Yeah. That's a great question, and I will readily admit I don't know the answer, but I believe that proceed cautiously. That
Okay.
Yeah, and if you find out the answer, send me an email, please.
I will do that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Because they're great, and
yeah,
I love them. It's a great way to hear a musician for sure. But I suspect, and it might be that this transmission exempt for small venues, maybe that's it. Let's hope that's it. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Sorry, I didn't think about it, but okay. So now we're going to move to line 160, and these are some specific instances of performance. And I just thought, and this addressed some of the questions that Mary had forwarded to us. And a concert, the venue should have a license. And this is interesting. They report via a form or by sending a copy of their program. And this is for paid admission, but it's also for free admission, except the allowable use exemption for charity concerts only. And so I do know from having talked to ASCAP in the past that they try to make it easy, and that is that you can just send your program. And so it may be, I imagine that many of you as wedding harpists have actually had the wedding coordinator ask for a list of all the songs and the composers, even if they weren't using for a program. And it may be that if it was a wedding at a hotel or something, that they're actually taking, the hotel is supplying that information. I don't know, but a concert, somebody has to have the license. The good news is it should be the venue and not you. So public performance in general, and I mentioned this as background music at a hospital, a nursing home, that sort of thing. It's not a formal concert, but you need to confirm that the venue has a license, either an ASCAP or a BMI, because I do believe that it is covered. And we're talking about their background music where you go and do a concert type performance, even if it's small. Okay, a wedding, if it's in a religious facility, then it's an allowable use exemption. Otherwise, it's best to confirm that the facility has a license. One of the websites that I went to actually specifically mentioned that it can be a wedding ceremony in a church, but if you're playing for the reception in the social hall, it is considered a public performance and it's subject to performing rights. Okay, and then we're going to go briefly into online. And so I've got 3 categories here on line 173. I've got YouTube, then Facebook, and then your website. And I sort of facetiously said, if you're wanting to post to YouTube, and if you want to monetize it, then good luck. Read all of the information. And so what the thing that's interesting, and I actually, this screen clip, the copyright claim basics, that actually came from YouTube. And this was just a couple of days ago that I pulled this. And so what happens is you can upload music, and then if, and they, a user or a composer can register their song. Let's start with that. And then if it gets uploaded to YouTube, they have algorithms and programs that are running all the time. And if they hear that music, then they can actually put a claim on your upload, and then you have to go through this process, and they can ask you to take it down. So that was pretty interesting. And I'm sure we've all tried to click on a link and it says that it's been removed. And that's why, is because there was probably a copyright violation there. And then over on the right-hand side on line 177, I've got information about YouTube monetization. And so this is the process that they go through. And so they listen for any user-generated content that is the use of a particular song, and then they go through this, what they call the content management system for content ID, scanning, and monetization. So you can do that. And we've all seen this. When then what happens is if they will put an ad in it, and then you can get money from it. So you, as we see all the time, you can definitely upload copyrighted music and get paid for it. But if your upload's probably going to have an ad attached. I hope that
Can I
makes sense.
just clarify something about that based on what I've experienced?
Please do. Thank you.
If I think what I'm going to say is true. If I upload a video that has an audio track owned by someone, I think it's that the copyright license holder, with the support of the algorithm, can either take down my video, or they can put ads on my video and the copyright holder gets the music. So
Right.
that's my experience as a person who uploads something with copyrighted music.
Yes, thank
That's
you. Yeah,
yes.
I totally, I think I haven't done it.
Yeah,
You're
I think
absolutely right.
that's what happens.
Yes, yeah. And I read that the copyright holder can actually select the ads that they want, which is pretty interesting. I often think that now that I know that they can select them, I often think they would die if they knew the ad that I just saw for them. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And I believe you're absolutely correct. And so then you, or as the performer, you do get money from YouTube, right? Okay. Facebook, I've got good luck here also, and then here's a link. But what I read, and I did this research last week, as I said, I felt like I was writing a term paper. On YouTube, not YouTube, but on Facebook, they actually have recently, from what I read, gotten more diligent on trying to be careful with copyrights and to pay people for the use of their music if somebody else has uploaded it. And then on your website, so this is where you would want, if you sell arrangements and you want to sell them on your website and you want to have a sound recording of it, then you have various options, and there's a way to secure licenses for that use. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Back to combining the Sheet Music Plus idea. If you wanted to upload a video on Sheet Music Plus as a sample for your music, do you need a performance license for that?
I will say, and Megan, you may be able to answer this. I don't think so, because there is a way for you to upload it easily. It literally, when you are keying in the information for your publication, there's a place where you can upload a sound. Oh, sorry, my husband is downstairs. Anyway, there's a way for you to upload a recording very easily. So Megan, do you know on that one?
I have no idea.
Okay.
No idea at all, but you're right. It's super easy. You just upload an MP3 file.
Yes. Yeah.
Angie, Nancy Cochran, I have a question similar to that. If I would record myself playing anything, and I wanted to send that to a friend in an MP3, is that legal if the music is copyrighted, or can you only do that with public domain?
I think the very difficult news is that you need a mechanical license for that.
Wow.
And legally, okay. And when we move into Harry Fox will talk about that. They literally will license even a minimum of 25. And so one of the things that I read says that even if it's one copy, and I imagine that those of you, and I see Darren here also, if you've published arrangements and somebody wants to record, they probably ask you for permission and that sort of thing. And I always tell them to go to Harry Fox, because you do need to pay print licenses. And people say, well, I'm only going to publish, I'm only going to manufacture, back in the days when we made CDs, I'm only going to manufacture 100 CDs. And I say, I think you still need to get licenses for, get mechanical licenses for those 100 CDs.
So even if you just play it from your own memory and you're not playing the exact, I didn't know that. I've only done this one time, but it was Ubi Caritas, and I played from memory. So if you just play, even if you're improvising, but you know that you're improvising on a published work, you would still need a license to send it anywhere.
I believe that that's the case to be legal. That's,
all right then, thank you.
if somebody disagrees, let me know, but I think that that's the case. And I will also, I'll pause here. I don't want to take too much time with this, but I will pause here to say that I believe in doing absolutely the right thing, trying our best to do the right thing. So don't share copies of print music. Harper Tosh has a wonderful paragraph on the front of each of his books, and it just asks you basically to do the right thing. And I put in my books, you're welcome to make copies for your own use, but please don't share it with friends and with students, that sort of thing. And Harper said, I forget the exact wording, but he says it's hard enough to make money in this music business. And if you want us to continue to do what we do.
On that same subject, I have vision issues. And when I had ordered a piece from Canada, it was by Elizabeth Volpe Bly. And I asked them, look, I have to enlarge things. So are you allowed to, if you have a disability, are you allowed to make more than one copy? Because the licenses, when you download a PDF, that was a PDF and I bought the score. But when you download a PDF, it says one copy of this is licensed only. Can you make extra copies for yourself?
I believe you can, and I think I have seen this somewhere, and I'm sorry, Nancy, I'm not going to know exactly, but if it's for your personal use, I think that's fine.
Okay.
And we all, back in the day, I do everything on an iPad now, but back in the day, I would have a copy of something in 2 or 3 different repertoire books. But I always encourage myself and everybody to own a legal copy. If you play that music, own a legal copy.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So, of course. Thank you so much.
That wasn't a lecture, that I'm just saying. Okay. Synchronization license. This is something I was making some notes this morning for this presentation today. And I said, I have no experience, so no questions, please. So anyway, but this is where your song is used in a movie. So if you think about where your recording is used, you think about the Big Chill, the movie had great music in it. And so they would have negotiated and paid synchronization licenses for that. And then it's fun every once in a while if you see a commercial on TV that has one of your favorite performing artists and it's the recording of their song, then you can know that they got paid for that, a synchronization license. Okay, the last section starts on line 192, and this is about locating the copyright holder or the copyright administrator, and then just some other useful links. So I wanted to emphasize several of them. The first thing is the most obvious as far as locating the copyright holder is to look at the bottom of the music that you own. And what you will find is that copyright notice should say who the copyright holder is. And then we'll talk about how Leonard has a search. You can go on SMP Press, which we all now know about, and it will tell you who the administrator is. In many cases, Hal Leonard has hundreds of imprints. So if you want to publish an arrangement of something that's EMI Blackwood or Universal, I'm just going to keep talking. All different imprints that Hal Leonard administers, then you would go to Hal Leonard. They have an online request process whereby you can apply for a print license. So, but start with the copyright notice. That's a good place to look, especially if it is something that is a harpist, obviously, that has published it. Then you should be able to contact them if it's their original work. Okay, I mentioned these PROs, which are performance right organizations. ASCAP has a clearance express. Many of you probably are familiar with ASCAP ACE, and it has a wonderful search functionality, and it will tell you information about the composer, but also about whoever administers the copyrights. And BMI likewise has a song view, which is a repertoire search. And these are for songs that either ASCAP or BMI represent as a performance right organization. There's also CSAC, which is by invitation only. So that's not as widely known, and there aren't as many songs as there are with ASCAP and BMI. Songfile is a wonderful place to look. That's Harry Fox Agency, and they have a public search where you can, it's actually for mechanical licensing, which is for CDs, but it's a very easy way to find who holds the copyright so that you know how to pursue getting your license for that. SMP Press, we've talked about. Mary Radspinner, this is on line 205. Mary, I found that you had a section about on Sheet Music Plus. So that is great. That's a nice document, and I got the link here. Hal Leonard administers, as I've mentioned, gazillions, Alfred, and then very important, this is something that many of us are familiar with, on line 212, CCLI is the Christian Copyright Licensing International. This is what many of the churches that have been streaming, this is the type of license that they have. It's very important to know that they can have a CCLI, just a general license, which gives specific permission for churches to perform pieces and to say distribute or have on an overhead the lyrics to a piece. But for their services that are streamed, they would need to have an additional streaming license. And so then that covers, and then they also have, so there are 3 different types of licenses that they have. And then there's also master recording. So, but the good news is that for churches, most contemporary or most Christian music can be administered with that one license. And it is a blanket license, which means that number one, we as the musicians don't have to have a license. It's covered by CCLI. The church would have that license, and then they would have a streaming license that very easily covers the streaming of the service for the songs that are administered by CCLI, which are almost all of the Christian music. Then the last one I wanted to highlight is line 216, which is Easy Song Licensing. I personally have never used that, but I've known a number of people who have used that for licensing. So I'm going to pause here. We've got just a couple more minutes, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions. I did mention there was going to be a pop test at the end, right? Not really.
Angie, this is Ann Elizabeth here. Just a comment. I think this is a marvelous and wonderful resource that you've given us. And I congratulate you for getting all this information together. It's very, very helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and you're very welcome. You're very, very welcome.
Judy White, I've got a question.
Yes.
Okay, I've arranged a lot. Arrange a lot for ensembles. And a lot of times I will take songs that other people have published and we'll use that as harp one, and then I create a harp two. I've even done that on several of your songs, but other people's as well. So if I wanted to publish the harp twos, would I need to get permission where I don't use any of the melody of the song? The only thing is that I mention the song, and then I would mention, whose book it goes along with or whose music it is.
Yes. Hey, Judy, I didn't realize you were here. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I think that I'm going to direct to, let's see if I can find it. It's in the copyrights section. Anyway, it's chord patterns and even bass patterns. So I'm afraid that the answer is yes. And I will pause here to say, in a lot of cases, certainly, and I imagine RoJean, you do the same thing, and others, that if people that are harpist friends, if they write and ask if they can use the arrangement or whatever, I always say yes, and I don't charge for that. But if you were going to formally publish it, I think you probably should abide by the licenses. I'm trying to, somewhere on this handout, I have what all is covered, and it really does include even chord patterns. So, which obviously, if you're doing a harp 2, would be the same chord patterns.
Thank you.
Sorry, but yeah.
Line 52. Line 52.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, that's the copyright section. I apologize, but and you think about it, and we've known where there have been copyright, where it's gone to court, where there was somebody used a melody that they didn't even realize was a melody similar to somebody else's earlier work, and where it's been a violation of the copyright, and they've been sued for that. So
Angie, this
yes.
is Cindy Schelfenbuhl again. I think we're looking at line 64 and 65 for the definition of what a composition is.
Thank you so much. Exactly. So it's the melody, progression, lyrics, rhythmic pattern, or any combination thereof. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, oh darn, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have a question? We have just a minute or two.
I have a question. It's Megan here. If someone were to contact you, Angie, asking for a license to publish an arrangement of one of your original pieces, and you decided to say yes, but to charge them, how would you do that? How does that agreement work?
It would be a print license. So,
and what is that? What form does that take? Is that a document you write up and then they need to send you the money directly?
yes, and it can be, and
Okay.
I've had that happen in just a few instances where it was somebody, actually, I will say I'm not trying to promote my stuff, but I did the 2 books, The Music of Friends. And so I literally created a 1-page print license to get their permission for me to publish my arrangement of their original pieces. And so it was just very simple. It laid out what the terms were. I will say that one of the things that was very important to include in there is who their survivor would be. In other words, so I did, and I was very thankful I had that. I published an arrangement of a piece that Kathy Bundick Moore had written. And between my first printing and my second printing, she passed away. And so I was very thankful to have the information that she had provided on that print license. And I'd be glad to share that with you, Megan. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else?
Angie, this is Nancy. When I played a harp at a religious store, And I did a million years of research on copyrights for that. What you have done is phenomenal. It's the masterpiece of copyright, music, copyright. Thank you so much. And what I did, I called two arrangers of music, and I had permission from Sylvia Woods to play anything in her music book in the 50 carols. And then I got in touch with Laura Dillon, who published with Chuck Booty a book of flute and harp music that's adaptable for all instruments. And they wrote to me, Laura wrote to me and said, you have permission to play all of these arrangements. There is a disclaimer in their book that said they had research copyrights, and they believed that that everything in their book, it was okay for them to use it. That's a complicated arrangement. I was just glad to have something I could play.
Yeah, and Nancy, thank you for bringing that up. There's something that I put in the motherly advice on page 1 that pertains, I think, to that, and something that many people have learned the hard way, or they've done it wisely. Let me rephrase that. So starting at the end of line 20, as a path of least resistance, many musicians use public domain music to avoid the hassle of licensing. And so that's why we have a wealth of Celtic arrangements available for the harp. And I will say also, I've done the same thing that Sylvia's done, and I imagine, RoJean, you probably did the same thing or something similar, and that is if you're going to publish arrangements, it's smart to put all public domain music in one book and copyrighted music in another book, because the public domain music, your arrangements, would have no royalties associated with it. And this is an important thing to know. If you have a book that contains any copyrighted pieces in it, then it is the price of the book. So let's say if it's a $20 book, and if it's a print book, it's $15, 15%, so it'd be $3. And then that gets divided by the number of copyrighted songs in the book. It's $3 no matter what. So if you put one song, it's $3. If you have 10 songs in the book and they're all copyrighted, it's still $3. And so that's, I hope I'm not confusing the issue, but that's why you'll see so much public domain music that's been arranged, and then why there's not so much copyrighted music that's been arranged, because the print licenses add cost and hassle. And so, I published a book that has, I think, 40 hymns in it, and traditional. So the Lead Sheet Basics series, those are all copyrighted. Those are all public domain pieces by design. All right.
Okay, well, Angie, does anyone have any, RoJean, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. That was an exhaustive research.
I'm tired just now after listening to this. I can't imagine. How many hours did you put into that?
Probably 20 or 30. It was a lot. So.
Wow.
You are wanted to know it. We all need to know that. I have, and I say the same thing about arranging. Only one person should have to do this much work and then share it. So that's what this is all about, is sharing it.
But that's what's great about the harp community. I have found this across the board. It's really helpful.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you, Angie, so much for your 30 hours worth of work. And we are all very grateful for what you've done, and we are enlightened. And because of this, we will not get into trouble, right?
Not yet. Yeah, and thanks, Megan, also. Thank you so much. I was delighted when Mary said you were going to be on the session. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just so happy to be here learning from you, because your knowledge is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
I came here as a learner, not as an expert. I hope you all know that.
And thank you, RoJean, and thank you, Megan, and thank you, Angie. And if no one has any other questions, I think that we will sign off. And just with great gratitude, and we learned so much. And thank you, everybody. Until the next time, happy harping.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And I'm going to sign off, and everything gets recorded. So I will sign off now too.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Welcome.